Welcome to Knicks Deli, baby. The lights were always too bright at Madison Square Garden. That's part of what makes it special. They don't dim for the sake of anyone's comfort or humility. You either become a legend and glow in it, or you vanish in the shadows. I know I'm being dramatic, but I don't care. Because in 2015, there was a tall, skinny, 19-year-old kid from Latvia walking into those lights and into the most unforgiving embrace in basketball. The New York Knicks fan base. Yeah, we call them Tingus Pingers. Yeah, we didn't know what the New York Knicks were doing. We boo every draft pick at that time. Porziņģis was booed by us on draft night. Mercilessly, publicly. Even Stephen A. Smith's mustache looked like it was frowning. But that kid stood tall, literally and figuratively. He smiled, he nodded, and then he got to work. Porziņģis' rise was swift, it was meteoric even. For a time, he felt like the Knicks' first ray of genuine hope since peak Melo years. His rookie season was a revelation. The man was a 7'3" shot blocking, 3-point launching phenom with footwork out of a ballet and a killer instinct of a sniper. KD called him a true unicorn. When a Hall of Famer stamps you, that's when you've made it. In the New York Knicks fan base, we needed that. We needed that validity. We needed that confirmation. Knicks fans fell in love. We even apologized. The boos turned into chants. You know, MVP rang through the garden after monster dunks and even a 35-point game. He wasn't just a player for us. The man was a symbol. He was a symbol that just maybe New York had finally found its next great savior. And he had those tools. But fairy tales in the garden never end cleanly. There was betrayal. And then there was a battery in his back that we couldn't quite put a finger on. Something shifted. Whispers turned to headlines. Porziņģis wasn't happy. Front office was dysfunctional. The roster was a mess. And then the direction of the franchise felt aimless. We had Phil Jackson's departure. And at the same time, he needed to go, but that left the leadership vacuum. James Dolan wasn't present, but he was always ominous. The real fracture wasn't on the court, but the fracture was actually in the locker room and beyond. Kristaps Porziņģis had looked up to Carmelo Anthony. Yeah, I'm doing it. You already know me. He idolized him. But the mentor became a murky figure in Kristaps' journey. New York was doing him dirty. Melo. Rumors began to swirl. Melo was embittered by his own complicated Knicks chapter, and he allegedly began to plant seeds of doubt. Some said he encouraged KP to look beyond the Knicks, to see the Garden not as a home, but as a stage to eventually leave behind. A stage that wasn't worth dying on. And Porziņģis kind of alluded to something along those lines. Then came the skip exit interview with management, the cryptic tweets, the dissatisfaction made public. And finally, without warning, the bomb dropped. January 31st, 2019, the Knicks trade Kristaps Porziņģis to the Dallas Mavericks. There was no press tour. There was no long goodbye. No tribute video. It was surgical. It was cold. It was fast. One day he was the unicorn, the next day he was a ghost. We as Knicks fans, we turned on him instantly because we saw the energy. The Bulls returned, but this time they stayed. He was branded as a diva, a traitor, a player who never wanted to be here, a foreign prince who came for the throne and fled at the first sign of war. You can't be like that in New York City. The Garden eventually turned the page, but allegedly Porziņģis never forgot. He bounced around a little bit, going to Dallas, going to other places. He was kind of stuck in the wilderness. Kristaps' post-Knicks journey was supposed to be glorious. The Mavericks were a young, rising team. They had Luka Doncic, and they also had a clear direction. But it didn't work. Injuries returned, chemistry faltered, The media called him a poor fit. Luka and KP had all the makings of a modern-day Stockton and Malone, but they never even got close to the conference finals. The man was traded again to the Washington Wizards. And at that time, Washington Wizards, they were like basketball purgatory. Then, he became a free agent. He finally landed in Boston, and everything changed. The Celtics saw what the Knicks once saw, potential. And they did something New York could never. They built a structure around him. He stayed healthy. He played with joy. He was efficient. He was impactful. He became dangerous. He was also a seamless third star behind Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And for the first time since 2017, Kristaps Porziņģis felt whole again. And then the sky opened up and the basketball gods smiled with cruel irony. A playoff matchup between the Knicks and the Celtics. High stakes, high drama. When his return to the Garden is not as a washed-up villain, but as a legitimate threat to end our championship dreams, that time is now. So this, finally, can be the moment Kristaps Porziņģis has waited for. It's like he's no longer a ghost, but he's a man back for revenge. This isn't going to be just another playoff series. This was Greek tragedy disguised as NBA drama. Unicorn is coming back, not with grace, but with vengeance in his heart. And it isn't hard to understand why. Every time he returned, we gave him the business as Knicks fans. It's because we worshipped him while he was here. And then we had to spit him out. The front office, then led by Steve Mills, had to cast him aside like he was a radioactive because his brothers were pumping him up. And lurking behind it all was the shadow of Carmelo Anthony's influence, and that loomed large. Whispers about in circles and podcasts, a quiet betrayal. The story all writes itself. That's why I'm being dramatic about it. For Porziņģis, Game 1 at Madison Square Garden isn't just going to be a playoff game. It's going to be a reckoning. I expect him to try to bury us because it's a return to the scene of one of his traumas, a chance to rewrite the narrative, not by apologizing and not by reconciling, but by winning. In his mind, I imagine this. It's the only way to silence the Bulls once and for all. But I got news for him, because across from him is going to be something that he didn't necessarily expect. A team that's going to fight back. It's not going to be easy, as Celtic fans will lead you to believe. The team is built in the image of resilience, of second chances, of grit. That's this New York Knicks team. And we're led by Jalen Brunson, once his teammate, okay? And the heart of the Garden has three pieces, three components: Brunson, Tom Thibodeau, and a collective brotherhood of belief. When Kristaps walks back into the Garden, he doesn't see ghosts anymore. He is the ghost. The one that we used to believe in. The one that we allegedly buried too quickly. But the Garden now has new spirits, and they all wear orange and blue armor. So be ready for a fight. We ain't gonna roll over because you have on a green jersey. Jalen Brunson is not the most physically imposing guard in the league. He doesn't glide across the court like Kyrie. He doesn't soar like John Morant. But none of that matters to us, because Brunson's power isn't his athleticism, it's his will. It's also his elite level footwork. But the man doesn't play to silence the crowd. He plays to lift it. And that's exactly what we were hoping for in New York from Kristaps. But it's exactly what we're getting from Brunson. And that's the difference between the Porziņģis era and the Brunson era. KP was adored for what he could become. Brunson is beloved for what he is. The heartbeat of a team that doesn't blink. The heartbeat of a team that doesn't run. And that doesn't fold when the lights get too bright. Kristaps Porziņģis came to MSG to write his revenge tour. But when Brunson steps in, he's going to be the author of a different story. One of defiance, unity, unfinished business. All right? It's not personal, it's business. It's poetic. It's time for us to get rid of the ghost of Kristaps Porziņģis. What do you think? Keep this in mind. Same thing applies to life that applies to our team. If there's no struggle, there's no progress. But remember this, whether it's out there in the real world, here in these YouTube streets, here in Knicks Deli, everybody hates. I'm gonna shit about. Peace.